This is a tutorial about how to install and run the Baxter algorithms. First, I will tell you how to download the software. You go to tinyurl.com/ba-alpha. And alpha stands for the alpha version of the software, which is an internal version that we don't share publicly, and therefore there's a password. And then you get to this Dropbox link where you open the folder for the latest version, and then you have two options, either software or source code. Software is a deployed version of the software which you can install like any other program on your computer. And source code is source code that you can run in MATLAB if you have a MATLAB license. So if I open software, I choose the file corresponding to my operating system. In my case, it's 64-bit Windows. If you're using 64-bit Mac, you use the other one. And if I download this, I get an executable file which installs the program. So when I double-click that, I open the installer. Here I just click next. I check this box to get a desktop shortcut, and then the installer tells me that I already have the MATLAB compiler runtime installed. You may not have it, and in that case it will install the MATLAB compiler runtime for you. And then I press install. And that's it. Now I have the software installed. Double click the desktop shortcut that I just created. That opens the main user interface of the software. I also get this terminal window where output from the program will be printed if I get an error message or if I have some other output. If I instead download the source code, I find this file called baxteralgorithm.m inside MATLAB, and I press run to execute it. And then I get the same user interface, and output from that is printed into the command window instead of to the terminal. But I will work with the deployed version because that's probably what you will use. If you're familiar with programming and you have a MATLAB license, you should use the source code, but otherwise use the deployed version. And now let's say that I have an image sequence that I want to process. So here's a folder with some images of muscle stem cells. They are separated by 3 minutes. This is the cell, and this is a micro well with a diameter of 600 micrometers. So the important thing is that the files are in alphabetical order and that they are TIFF files. They should be named TIFF with one F. You shouldn't be using any TIFF stacks or other file formats. Just use single TIFF images, one image for every time point. You should also use grayscale TIFFs with a single image channel. And then you create an experiment folder, and you place your image sequence folder inside the experiment folder. It's a common mistake to try and open this image sequence folder in the program, but that won't work. So then I go to File, Open Experiment, and then I find my experiment folder that I just created. And as you saw, there were many options here, and that's because I've selected the advanced level for menus. If you select the basic level instead, you see only the most important menus, and that makes it easier to find what you're looking for, but you get more flexibility if you select the advanced option. And there's also a development option, but those menus are under development and you shouldn't use any of the functions there, unless I tell you to, of course. So here I get the image sequences in this list box. Now there's only one here, of course, and then the first image of each sequence shows up here. Once you've opened your experiment, you can specify settings for each image or for all of them at once. So here you select the image sequence that you want to specify settings for, and the settings are separated into different categories for image acquisition, segmentation, tracking, and analysis. For now, we'll only have to specify the image settings. And just as in the main user interface, you can select different levels. So now you get more options, but the most important ones are under the basic level. And bits specifies the number of camera bits. If you have 8 bits, you're fine. But if you have more bits, for example 12 bits, you will have to enter this here. Otherwise your images won't show up correctly. And if you have 12 bits, the images will be 16-bit images. So you should specify the number of bits in the camera, not the number of bits in the image. And if I specify the imaging condition here, for example control, or the experimental condition, then I can save my settings, and everything that I enter is saved in this settings.csv. Once you are happy with the settings, you can play the image sequence by pressing manual play. Here you can play the sequences just like in a media player. You can go from one image to the next by pressing these buttons on the slider, and you can also drag the slider to new time points. By pressing start, you can play the sequence, and by pressing next and previous, you can go to the next or previous image sequence if you have multiple sequences. You can also use this drop down menu to go to other sequences. A nice way to quickly go through an image sequence is to enter, for example, 10 in this step text box, because then you will only display every 10th image, and then you can go through a sequence very quickly. Here on the drop-down menus, you can choose what channels to display. In this case we have only one channel, but you can have fluorescence channels that you can display or not display using this drop-down menu. You can also export images or entire image sequences using these drop-down menus. And now I'll just export one image. So I put it on the desktop, and here is the exported image. this was just a basic player where I can look at the raw image sequences, but the software also has other players where you can look at segmentation results or tracking results and other things. Here I'll show you the player for tracking results, where you can visualize tracks and correct them. So you can see that you have all of the controls that I just showed you in the basic player, but you also have some other controls, both menus and controls on a control panel to the right. I have tried to test the software as much as possible, but I'm sure that there are still some bugs in there. So if you run into one, please send me an email and describe the error that you had. You will normally get an error message in the terminal window or in the command window of MATLAB, so please copy the error message and send it to me, because that's very helpful when I try to fix the error. And also make sure that it's an actual error by looking in the user guide.